Good morning, Shindo here. Going to talk about the Secretary of State nominee, Rex Tillerson. I get a number of Trump supporters on my channel, so this is to you. Most of you Trump supporters are not okay with LGBT rights. Yet this grown man in 2010 lobbied when he became the head of the Boy Scouts to accept gay Boy Scouts. Now, if Rex Tillerson was a liberal and not a conservative, and if Rex Tillerson was an out-of-the-closet gay, then personally I would have no problem with it, even though I imagine many of you Trump supporters would. I'm not sure if you people actually know what's going on and who Donald Trump is. You don't. Otherwise, you wouldn't be supporting him as much as you do. The reason I mention this is I find it rather disturbing that a man who's not out of the closet and who is conservative is lobbying to have gay teens around him. A conservative man who lobbies and wins to have more gay teenage boys in the Scouts. Now, that strikes me as very peculiar. Also, those of you in the on the right, are you aware of the fact that Rex Tillerson, who has to go through the nomination process, and we'll see, but should be the Secretary of State under Donald Trump, the most important cabinet member? As the head of ExxonMobil, he supported the infamous, as far as you're concerned, the right is concerned, the infamous Planned Parenthood, which makes him, of course, pro-choice. So he's for LGBT rights, and he's pro-choice. Yes, folks, if you don't believe it, look it up for yourself. This is what Donald Trump is doing. He is a social liberal. His conservative policies are for economics. But if you believe that he is some kind of conservative who's going to burn down the house when it comes to going after those liberals, you got another thing coming. You got another thing coming, and you'll see it soon enough. But you'll still deny it because you went out there and voted for him, and you praise him like he's the second coming of Jesus Christ. This is from the New York Times. You will get a link in the description box. If you like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. Like my videos. I get plenty of thumbs down. Sometimes I'm shocked at the videos that I get thumbs down on and don't get thumbs down on. It's really kind of random. I'm never really sure, because I do any video and I can try to just try to skate right down the middle of any kind of policy decision, any kind of issue. I can skate right down the middle of it, and I'm still going to get thumbs down. So if you like it, please thumb it up. Comment on my channel, on my videos. Do so like an adult. Coming at me and calling me names, that's not what adults do. That's what children do. So either you're a child or you've got a child's mind on videos like this. Not even going to talk to you. And share my videos. Okay, New York Times, you will find a link to the article in the description box. In rocky hearing, Rex Tillerson tries to separate from Trump. Rex W. Tillerson on Wednesday told Senate committee weighing his nomination as Secretary of State that he would push back hard against Vladimir Putin's efforts to expand Russia's influence to the Ukraine, to Syria, to cyberspace. But in Rocky all-day hearing, Mr. Tillerson also found himself on the defensive when it came to ExxonMobil's lobbying activities for his reluctance to declare that some dictators were violators of human rights. One especially skeptical Republican was Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, whose vote on the Foreign Relations Committee might well decide the fate of Mr. Tillerson, the former chief executive of Exxon. In one contentious exchange with Mr. Rubio, who ran against President-elect Donald J. Trump last year for the Republican nomination, Mr. Tillerson rebuffed an effort to get him to describe Mr. Putin as a war criminal for ordering the bombing of civilians in Chechnya. Quote, "I would not use that term," unquote, he said. By the end of the day, Mr. Rubio would not commit to supporting Mr. Tillerson, saying that he was, quote, "prepared to do what is right," unquote, even if it meant siding with Democrats, which would most likely result in 11-10 committee vote against the nomination. Even so, the committee could still send it to the full Senate, where Mr. Tillerson's chances would be tenuous. On issue after issue, the dangers of letting Japan and South Korea obtain nuclear weapons, his opposition to a ban on Muslim immigration, the need to push back hard against Mr. Putin's efforts to expand Russian influence, Mr. Tillerson showed considerable independence from Mr. Trump, separating himself from many of the president-elect's campaign pronouncements. While Mr. Trump described an America that would defend allies only if they paid their fair share, Mr. Tillerson repeatedly emphasized fulfilling alliance commitments. Mr. Tillerson came to the hearing acutely aware that his first task was to ally concerns that his 4 decades of Exxon had left him close to Mr. Putin and dictators around the world. So he staked out his turf early in the hearing, arguing that he had been in office when had he been in office when Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, he would have recommended the United States provide arms and intelligence support for the government of Ukraine, even though it's not a member of NATO. Quote, "What the Russian leadership would have understood is a powerful response," he said, casting the Obama administration's reaction too weak. His message to the Russian leadership, he said, would be, quote, "Yes, you took Crimea, but this stops right here." But Mr. Tillerson dodged a series of questions about whether ExxonMobil was under his leadership had lobbied against the sanctions imposed to Russia, which prevented the company from fulfilling huge contracts, oil exploration on Russian territory. On climate change, Mr. Tillerson said he did not view it as an imminent national security threat that some others did, although he surprised many in the oil business by acknowledging the dangers of global warming and even embraced carbon taxes. As he did again on Wednesday, he said that much of the literature on the issue remained, quote, "inconclusive," despite the overwhelming consensus of the scientific community about the role of humans. Mr. Tillerson showed a deep familiarity with many of the most contentious issues in American foreign policy, including the rules governing transactions with the Cuban government and the outlines of the Iranian nuclear deal. It was on Iran that he tried to strike a middle ground between Republicans who said the deal should be scrapped, including Vice President-elect Mike Pence, and those who simply call for tougher enforcement of its provisions. He promised a, quote, "comprehensive review" that would include confidential side agreements, largely between Iran and international nuclear inspectors, that have been the subject of Republican suspicions. But his real complaint about the 2015 accord is that its key restrictions on Iran expire in 2030, and he said he feared Iran would, quote, "go back to where they were, trying to build a nuclear weapon." At one point, Mr. Tillerson complained that there was no provision to keep Iran from buying a nuclear weapon, though later, after a break, he corrected himself to acknowledge that both the nuclear non Non-Proliferation Treaty, and the Iran Agreement itself contained prohibitions on any acquisition of nuclear device. Protesters shouted out regularly, interrupting Mr. Tillerson. He did not look at them, paused, expressionless as they were removed. He told the committee repeatedly that he would not act on human rights abuses such as the summary execution underway in the Philippines until he received corroboration, presumably from the American intelligence agency. That inflamed Mr. Rubio, who charged that Mr. Tillerson was ignoring easily verifiable news reports. It also angered Human Rights Watch, the non-government organization that monitored such violations. Rex Tillerson's reluctance, quote, Rex Tillerson's reluctance to acknowledge human rights abuses by Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the Philippines raised serious questions about whether he can effectively serve as Secretary of State, unquote. The group said in a statement, quote, numerous independent observers, UN investigators, media, and the humanitarian and human rights groups have published extensive and detailed reporting about the Russian government's highly problematic domestic human rights record and war crimes in Syria, unquote, and the killing in the Philippines of, quote, 6,200 suspected drug users in the last 6 months, unquote. Mr. Tillerson said he simply had an engineer's view of the need for evidence. Some of the day's most fascinating moments came as Mr. Tillerson tried to weave a fairly conventional hard power view of American influence in the tapestry that clearly rejected some of Mr. Trump's views. Although the president-elect has said that he doubted the usefulness of United States-led sanctions against Russia for its incursion into the Ukraine, Mr. Tillerson took the opposite view. He said they look forward to working with the Senate, quote, particularly on the construct of new sanctions against Moscow in an effort to cause modification in Russia's positions, unquote. At the same time, in a tense series of exchange, Mr. Tillerson said he could not say whether Exxon had lobbied against Russia's sanctions after the annexation of Crimea, even though the company had submitted filings saying it was lobbying on the topic. Quote, let's be clear, the company said on Twitter on Wednesday afternoon. Quote, we engage with lawmakers to discuss sanction impacts, not whether or not sanctions should be imposed, unquote. There were other attempts to separate from position Mr. Trump took last year. Mr. Tillerson indicated that President Bashar al-Assad of Syria would ultimately have to leave power, the Obama administration's position, and assailed Mr. Assad's bombing of civilians. Mr. Trump has talked about allying with Mr. Assad and Russia to fight the Islamic State, even while acknowledging the Syrian leader is, quote, a bad guy. Pressed on Mr. Trump's calls for National Registry of Muslims, Mr. Tillerson said he, quote, would need to have a lot more information about how such an approach would even be constructed, unquote. Democrats questions Mr. Tillerson on whether his 41 years, the world's largest oil company, would affect his view of American national interest. Senator Benjamin L. Cardin of Maryland, the ranking Democrat on the Foreign Relations Committee, got the Democrats' key critique of Mr. Tillerson, arguing that, quote, having a view from a C-suite at Exxon is not the same of the view of the seventh floor of the Department of State, unquote, Mr. Cardin said, referring to where the Secretary's office is. Quote, and those who suggest that anyone who can run a successful business can, of course, run a government agency do a profound disservice to both, unquote, he said. Well, from what you're reading now, from what you're hearing now, it looks as though Tillerson may not get the nomination. But you know, so many things have happened during the course of this election that was a surprise. So I'm not willing to say that he's not going to get it, even if you hear other people say that he's not. But I can assure you that you may not even know how Trump came across Tillerson. Trump did not know who he wanted as Secretary of State. So he gave a call to Condoleezza Rice, who was Bush's Secretary of State. And she conferred with, I don't remember, someone else. And then she called Trump back, and she suggested somebody that Trump didn't even know. This is, it's strange. It's odd behavior. But the thing is, it doesn't really matter who's in Trump's cabinet that much, because Trump is going to ultimately be the authority over everything. Eventually, I see him as at least attempting to be an authority that is worldwide. Of course, the President of the United States has worldwide power, not just here in the United States. Regardless, Trump is going to do whatever he wants to do, and he's not going to have anyone telling him what to do. And, folks, that is not a good thing. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing, because eventually Trump's going to do something you don't like. Even those people I get on here on the alt-right, I get people on my channel who are telling me that they're looking forward to Trump burning down the house. Well, I don't know if you're going to be looking forward to Trump burning down the house if you're still in the house, you morons. I really don't get how people can't get the concept of how dangerous someone is who runs for president and who is now going to be president when he has the only motivation for somebody like Trump to run for president is power. He already has the wealth. He already has what many people go into the presidency now, which, obviously is what Hillary Clinton wanted. But I can understand what Hillary Clinton wanted, and I can understand where she's going to be coming from. She was predictable. Donald Trump is not. Donald Trump, by his tweets and by his actions, you can see that the man is not of his right mind. His behavior is schizophrenic. And the behavior of the people who are part of this Trump cult is now becoming schizophrenic. It's only going to get worse. I wish I could tell you to have hope, but there's be practical. Be practical. This man is going to systematically tear down everything that this country holds dear. Liberty, freedom. First thing he's going to do is go after the First Amendment. And now with CNN doing what they've done over the course of not just the election, but just over the course of the last couple of days, he is going to be able to institute policy that will go against the First Amendment. It's been done before. Look it up. Look up the Sedition Act Woodrow Wilson imposed. There was another one way back during the War of 1812 under Adams. This is nothing new. It is the office of the presidency that leads itself to tyrannical rule. And when you have a president who is a megalomaniac, what you have is a tyrant. And that's what we're about to see, folks. This first year or so is going to be laying down the foundation. Afterwards, you're really going to see it. But those of you who voted for Trump, you're going to come up with every excuse in the book as to why Trump is doing these things. He's doing it because he is a tyrant. And history will prove me right. It will. Just as I said that he would be elected, he will be a tyrant. The man has so many enemies. He's got more enemies than he does friends. And a man like him is going to go after his enemies. In a way, I admire that. But people like him who are not of a stable mind, you may be his friend today, but that does not mean that you're going to be his friend tomorrow. This is Shindo. Have a good Thursday.